The moment he said that name, the entire restaurant went silent inside my mind. It wasn't loud or dramatic. He just whispered it, softly, like someone remembering a dream you're not supposed to touch. A name he could never have known. I froze with my fingers still wrapped around the warm Christmas mug. Outside, snow kept falling, slow, gentle, almost sacred, as if the world itself had paused to listen. He looked at me with a strange mix of confusion and recognition, like he was seeing someone he'd been searching for, someone who shouldn't exist in front of him. "I'm sorry, but that name, why does it feel like it belongs to you?" My chest tightened, because that name belonged to a person no one alive should remember, a name buried in my family's silence, a name I had never spoken to anyone, not even once. And yet, he said it. Before we go any further, could you tap the like button? It helps this story reach more people who love emotional stories. Thank you. Now, let's begin. Because before that impossible moment, before the shock and the trembling and the name that froze my soul, there was just a simple blind date, a Christmas evening I almost canceled, a stranger I wasn't supposed to meet, and a disaster I thought would end my night, long before it changed my entire life.
If I'm honest, I wasn't supposed to be there that night. Not on December 22nd, not in that little Christmas cafe downtown, and definitely not sitting across from a stranger chosen by an algorithm my best friend swore would change my life before the year ends. I almost canceled twice. Once while choosing my coat, and again when I saw my reflection in the frosted window before walking in. There was just something about December, the lights, the music, the memories, that made everything heavier than it should be. But the cafe door opened with a soft jingle, and the warmth inside pulled me in before my doubts could drag me back. The place smelled like cinnamon, vanilla, and roasted almonds. Small snowflake lights hung from the ceiling, blinking softly like a heartbeat. It should have felt comforting. Instead, I felt like I was stepping into a chapter I wasn't ready to read. He arrived 5 minutes late, not enough to be rude, but just enough to unsettle the careful balance of my nerves. Tall, wearing a dark green sweater that matched the ornaments above us, he walked in with a distracted look, as if he'd been searching for someone entirely different. When his eyes finally landed on me, he froze for the briefest moment. Not the "wow, she's pretty" freeze, not even the "oh no, I didn't expect this person" freeze. It was something else, something like recognition, even though we had never met.
He stepped toward the table, still studying me with that strange, searching expression. "Hi," he said, a little breathless. "You must be Emma." I nodded, even though the way he said my name felt slightly off, like he was testing how it sounded on his tongue, making sure it matched something in his memory. The first few minutes were awkward but harmless. He knocked over the tiny table bell when sitting down, apologized 3 times, then made a nervous joke about being allergic to first dates. I smiled politely, trying to shake off the odd feeling that kept crawling up the back of my neck. The waitress brought 2 hot chocolates decorated with small peppermint pieces. He thanked her, but his eyes were still on me, steady, curious, almost too focused. "So," he began, tapping the mug, "this is going to sound strange, really strange, but have we met before? Maybe years ago?" I shook my head. "No, I don't think so." He laughed softly, embarrassed. "Right, sorry, just had a weird moment, like déjà vu or something." I tried to redirect the conversation, but every topic seemed to slide sideways. He'd ask a question, then drift off mid-answer, staring at me as if trying to remember something he'd forgotten long ago. At one point, he reached toward the necklace resting on my collarbone, a small silver pendant shaped like a winter leaf, and then stopped himself, folding his hand back quickly. "Sorry," he said again. "It just looked familiar." That word again, familiar. I took a deeper breath, feeling the warmth of the cafe start to press on my skin. I'd been on awkward dates before, but this was different, like the awkwardness was hiding a deeper current underneath, a quiet hum of something waiting to surface. Then came the true disaster. I made a casual, harmless comment about how December always made me emotional. He responded with something unintentionally sharp, something that hit a place inside me he couldn't possibly know existed. It wasn't offensive, just too close, too precise, like stepping on a memory I hadn't shared with anyone. My smile fell, the kind of fall you can't pretend didn't happen. He saw it immediately and panicked, words tripping over themselves as he tried to fix what he'd said. But the damage was done. Not because he meant anything wrong, but because the comment shouldn't have been possible for a stranger. "I think I should go," I said, gathering my coat.
He stood quickly, reaching out but not touching me. "Wait, Emma, please, I didn't mean... I just got confused. I'm sorry."
I wanted to walk away. I truly did. But then he said something that stopped me mid-step, not out loud, just quietly, like a name whispered inside the air between us. "Emma, please don't go. Not again. Not again." My heart jolted. It wasn't the words themselves, it was the way he said them, as if repeating something from a memory, as if we'd lived this moment before. I turned slowly. "Why would you say that?" He blinked, startled by his own sentence. "I don't know. It just came out." But his eyes said otherwise. His eyes said he felt something he couldn't explain, something that tied me to him long before this blind date. I stepped closer, unsure why. He looked right into me, as if searching for truth in the shape of my face. And then, with a quiet, trembling breath, he called me by my full name. A name I hadn't given him, a name that wasn't on my profile, a name no stranger should know, a name tied to a past I had spent years avoiding. The room blurred, the lights dimmed, my heartbeat echoed in my ears, and the night that shouldn't have happened, truly began.
For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Hearing my full name, the one I rarely used, the one tied to memories I kept carefully folded away, sent a quiet ripple of shock through my chest. I looked at him, really looked, searching for any sign that he was making a harmless mistake, but his expression wasn't playful or confident. It was startled, almost frightened of himself. I must have read it somewhere," he said quickly, rubbing the back of his neck. "On your profile, maybe?" "It's not on my profile," I whispered. He froze again. The cafe music in the background, soft instrumental holiday songs, suddenly felt too loud, as if filling the silence between us with questions neither of us could answer. "I'm sorry," he said, shaking his head. "This is coming out all wrong. I didn't mean to make things weird. It's just when I looked at you, something felt familiar, like a memory I couldn't place. A familiar memory of someone he couldn't have known." That was the part I didn't say.
I sat back down slowly, not because I felt comfortable, but because leaving felt unfinished now. Something had shifted in the air, pulling me back into that chair like a thread tightening around both of us. He took a careful breath. "Let's start over. I want this to be normal. I promise I'm not trying to say anything strange." But even as he said that, I could tell he was unsettled. His fingers drummed lightly against the mug, his eyes flicking to my pendant again, the silver winter leaf resting above my heart. "Where did you get that?" he asked, softly, almost hesitant. "A family gift," I answered. "Why?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "No reason. It just looked familiar for a second." That word again. Familiar. It was becoming a pattern, and patterns always meant something. He tried shifting the conversation to safer topics, holiday plans, winter traditions, favorite movies, but every time I answered, he paused, as if measuring my words against something he already knew.
At one point, he leaned back and studied me with a quiet intensity that made my breath tighten. "You know that feeling," he said, "when you meet someone and everything feels new but also not new, like you're remembering instead of discovering?" I forced a small smile. "Maybe, but usually not on a first date." "Right, of course," he said, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I sound strange today." The truth was, he didn't sound strange. He sounded conflicted, torn between wanting to be normal and trying to make sense of something pulling at the edge of his awareness. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Look, I want you to know I wasn't trying to upset you earlier. When you stood up to leave, something inside me panicked, like that moment had happened before and ended badly." I frowned. "What do you mean, ended badly?" He didn't know, he admitted. It was just a feeling, a strong one. A chill ran through me, though the cafe was warm. There was something uncanny in the way he spoke. Not rehearsed, not dramatic, just honest confusion. And yet, beneath his words, there was a truth he hadn't reached yet. A truth neither of us understood.
He looked down, fingers gripping the mug. "I don't want to scare you away. I really don't. But when I saw you tonight, something in me reacted, like I'd been waiting to find you, even though that makes no sense." I swallowed hard, because as much as I wanted to deny it, a small part of me felt it too, a quiet tug, like a memory brushing past my shoulder. Still, I kept my voice steady.
Maybe it's just holiday emotions, I said lightly. December does strange things to people. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Maybe, but I don't think that's all. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. And the strange part is, I feel like I said your full name before tonight, somewhere, somehow, but I can't remember where. My pulse quickened. There was no explanation for that, no reason, no logic, nothing that tied our lives together, except a name buried deep in my history, never spoken aloud. I should have walked away. I should have told him it was too much, too fast, too impossible. But something inside me whispered the opposite. Stay, listen, understand. And so I did. The night deepened around us, the snowfall outside turning heavier, softer, almost protective, and though neither of us fully realized it yet, that was the moment the story truly began.
There are certain memories we don't revisit often, not because they're painful, but because they feel unfinished, like a door we learned not to open. For me, that door was shaped like a name almost forgotten, almost erased, almost lost beneath years of silence, a name I had spent most of my life tiptoeing around, and yet there I was, sitting in a Christmas cafe with a stranger who spoke it as naturally as breathing. As he waited for my answer, his eyes searching mine for meaning he couldn't possibly know, something inside me loosened, a ribbon pulled from a very old knot, not enough to unravel, but enough to remember, just barely. "Can I ask you something?" he said, breaking the moment. "When I said your full name, did it bother you because of the way I said it, or because of what it reminded you of?" His question struck deeper than he knew. I didn't answer right away. Instead, my gaze drifted to the window beside us, where soft flakes of snow pressed against the glass like quiet little knocks from the outside world. The truth was simple, but not easy. "It reminded me," I whispered. "Of what?" he asked gently.
I hesitated, not because I didn't know, but because I had never spoken it aloud. Not once in my entire life. So instead of answering him directly, I let the memory come, one slow, delicate piece at a time. The forgotten name belonged to someone from long before I was born, someone my family spoke of only once in a hushed conversation I overheard by accident when I was 12. They mentioned the name with a kind of reverence, like touching something fragile. It wasn't said with fear, but with sorrow wrapped in gratitude. A person who protected the family during a difficult time, someone kind, someone important, someone who left too soon. But that wasn't the strange part. The strange part was that the name never appeared in any photo album, never in official documents, never in family stories shared during holidays. It was as if they were intentionally keeping the past in the shadows, allowing only traces of it to slip through. And I had learned, without being told, that asking about it wasn't welcome, that certain stories were safer kept quiet. Yet the name had lived inside me, a single thread I didn't pull. Until now.
A thread he had somehow grabbed without knowing it existed. I finally looked at him. "It reminded me of something from my childhood," I said carefully. "Something my family never really talks about." He leaned in slightly, not out of pressure, but curiosity, the kind that comes from a feeling you don't understand but can't ignore. "I'm sorry," he repeated softly. "I must have made a connection in my head and didn't realize it." But I wasn't convinced. Not completely. "Can you tell me the name again?" I asked. He blinked, surprised. "Really? I thought it upset you." "Just say it," I insisted, though my pulse fluttered unsteadily. He took a slow breath, and with a voice barely above a whisper, he repeated it. The name. The one hidden in my family's quietest corner. The one tied to an old winter story I had never dared ask about, and hearing it again, from him, did something strange to me. It didn't hurt. It didn't frighten me. It didn't even shock me. It felt familiar. If the night had been strange before, what happened next tilted everything even further. Because once he repeated the name, softly, almost apologetically, something in him changed. It was as if he realized he'd crossed an invisible line neither of us knew existed until that moment. He pulled back slightly, eyes lowered, his confidence dissolving into unease. "I shouldn't have said that," he murmured. "I don't know why it came to me so clearly." I wrapped both hands around my warm mug, grounding myself in its heat.
The cafe was still glowing with soft Christmas lights, but now the decorations seemed to watch us, quiet witnesses to something we weren't ready to understand. "I think we both need a moment," I said gently. He nodded, grateful for the pause. But even in the silence, tension threaded itself through the air like a crack forming across ice. When the waitress came to ask if we wanted anything else, he startled so visibly that she gave us a polite, confused smile. His napkin slid off his lap, and when he bent to pick it up, his chair bumped the table, spilling a thin line of cocoa onto the wooden surface. He winced. "I'm really off tonight." "It's okay," I said, though my voice wasn't as steady as I hoped. But awkwardness has a habit of multiplying, and this time it did so quickly. Trying to lighten the mood, I mentioned something harmless about winter traditions in my home, how my family used to leave a small lantern glowing in the living room on Christmas Eve. Before I could explain why, he answered too quickly. "I remember that." My breath caught. "You remember what?" He blinked, startled by his own words. I don't know. I didn't mean it like that." But the damage was done. The slip wasn't just strange, it was intimate. Too intimate. I felt heat rise beneath my collar as confusion replaced curiosity. This wasn't coincidence anymore. This wasn't small talk gone wrong. There was something beneath his words, like memories hiding inside him that didn't belong to him at all. "Maybe we should just keep things simple," I said, trying to breathe calmly. "Talk about normal things, hobbies, work, anything else."
He nodded quickly, as if grateful for an escape, but his attempts to be normal only pushed things further off balance. When he asked about my favorite winter movie, his question tripped into something else. "Did you used to watch it with—" He stopped himself abruptly. "With who?" I pressed. "No one," he said too fast. "No one, I misspoke." But his eyes said otherwise. A knot formed in my stomach. I stood, not in anger, but in a sudden instinct to move, to breathe air that didn't feel so crowded with unspoken questions. "I think I need to step outside for a second," I said. He rose too, almost knocking his chair back. "Emma, please wait. I don't want this to go wrong." "It already is," I whispered. He reached out, then lowered his hand before touching me. "I'm trying," he said softly. "I really am. I don't know why these things are coming out of me. They feel like echoes, like pieces of something I can't see." His voice held sincerity, not desperation, but confusion with edges of fear. I stepped away, meaning to leave entirely. But then, a soft chime from my phone stopped me. A notification, a message from him. Except he hadn't touched his phone. He hadn't typed anything. His hands were completely visible. I looked down at my screen, and there it was. The name. Just the name, sent as a message, as if someone or something had pressed send without him knowing. My heart lurched and my breath thinned. He stared at me confused. "What is it?" he asked. "I just sent you a message," I said. "No, I didn't," he whispered, stepping closer. "I swear I didn't." But the message was there, clear, impossible. That name again, appearing where it had no reason to be. The room tilted for a moment, my mind racing between logic and something far older than logic. "What's happening?" he whispered. "I don't know," I said, my voice trembling. "But this isn't just coincidence anymore." Outside, the snowfall thickened into a quiet curtain of white. Inside, the warmth of the cafe no longer reached me, because suddenly I felt like we were no longer alone with our questions. Something from the past was reaching forward, calling, connecting, insisting on being seen, and the night, already fragile, began to fracture.
I didn't leave the cafe. I couldn't, not after seeing that message on my screen, a message he swore he hadn't sent, a message containing a name no stranger should know, a name I had spent my whole life avoiding without understanding why. I stepped outside just long enough for the cold air to clear my thoughts. Snowflakes drifted softly against my coat, melting instantly. Tiny dots of cold that helped steady the trembling in my chest. The street was quiet, wrapped in that particular December stillness that feels more like a pause than silence. When I walked back inside, he was standing by the table, shoulders tense, hands in his pockets as if he didn't trust them anymore. "Can I see it?" he asked gently. I handed him the phone. He stared at the screen, confusion deepening with every second. "I didn't write this. I didn't even unlock my phone. I wouldn't pretend about something like this." I watched him carefully, the way his brows tightened, the way his breath caught slightly, the way he looked genuinely unsettled. There was no deception in his expression, only bewilderment and something that looked a lot like fear of himself. That fear unsettled me more than anything he had said all night.
How would my phone get a message like that? I whispered. If you didn't send it. He looked up, eyes meeting mine with a quiet gravity. I don't know, but I think whatever this is, it's not random. A shiver slipped down my spine. He sat down slowly, as if unsure the chair would hold him this time. I think we should talk, he said. Honestly, no trying to make it normal, no pretending nothing strange is happening. I hesitated, then nodded. Because at this point, pretending made less sense than the truth, so I sat across from him again. Something in his posture softened, a mixture of relief and responsibility settling over him. He took a long breath as if preparing to reveal something he didn't fully understand himself. Since I was a kid, I've had these moments. He searched for the right word. Not visions, not dreams, just flashes, feelings, sometimes names, sometimes people. It always comes like a memory, except it doesn't belong to anything I've actually lived.
My heart tightened. What do you mean, feelings? Like I'm remembering something from someone else's life. He paused. I never told anyone. It sounded too strange. I thought it would stop as I got older, but it didn't. And the name I said tonight, I've heard it before. The room seemed to narrow around us. You've heard it? Where? I whispered. In a recurring dream, he said softly. One I've had since I was little. I didn't understand the name. I didn't know who it belonged to. I just felt sadness and a kind of promise, something unfinished. My breath faltered. A promise, something unfinished. Those words pressed against a memory from my childhood, a quiet conversation I'd overheard once when the adults thought I was asleep. A loss, a winter, a name spoken gently, as if it mattered too much to be spoken often. Can you describe the dream? I asked. He looked at the table. I see a winter landscape, bright snow, a small lantern glowing on a porch, and someone walking away, someone I can never reach. His voice dropped. And every time I wake up feeling like I've failed at something important. The lantern. The same lantern my family lit every Christmas Eve. The lantern I'd mentioned earlier. The one he reacted to without realizing. My pulse throbbed in my ears. How could you dream about something connected to my family? I whispered. He shook his head, helpless. I don't know. But the moment I saw you tonight, the dream felt closer than ever, like meeting you unlocked something. There it was again, that sense of recognition he couldn't explain, and the impossible truth rising between us. We were connected by something older than this evening, older than chance, older than either of us understood. He reached slowly into this coat pocket. Can I show you something? He asked. I nodded, though I had no idea what to expect. He placed a small object on the table. A silver winter leaf pendant, identical to mine. My breath caught painfully. I found it years ago, he said. I don't know where it came from. I just kept it. It felt important. I touched the pendant on my neck, then the one lying on the table. A matching pair. Two halves of a story neither of us knew, but both of us carried. Where did you get this? I whispered. He shook his head again. I truly don't remember. It was just there, like it belonged with me. The room felt too quiet then, too full. The lights above us flickered softly, as if acknowledging something long hidden finally rising to the surface. I think, he said slowly, that whatever this is, it didn't start tonight. And I knew he was right, because the name he said, the pendant he somehow owned, the dream he carried since childhood, none of it was coincidence. It was a connection waiting to be uncovered. I didn't sleep that night. Not after the pendant. Not after the dream he described. Not after hearing the name echoed twice in his voice, as if it belonged to him as much as it belonged to the past I barely understood. I lay in bed with the window cracked open, letting the cold December air settle across the room like a blanket woven from old memories. The street outside was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of holiday lights and distant wind. But my mind refused to rest. 2 pendants, 1 dream, 1 name no one says, and a stranger who felt like he'd stepped out of a chapter written long before my life began. By morning, the weight of it became unbearable. There was only one place to go, only one person who might hold a missing piece: my aunt. She was the keeper of family stories, the ones told and the ones left in silence. She lived in a small house on the edge of town where pine trees brushed the roof in winter, and the porch light always stayed on even during the day. When I arrived, she opened the door with a warm smile, but her expression shifted the moment she saw the pendant resting against my collarbone. "You haven't worn that in years," she said quietly. "I know, and I need to talk to you about it." She stepped aside, letting me in without another word.
The living room smelled like pine and cloves, a familiar comfort that almost made me forget why I was there, but the weight in my chest reminded me quickly. We sat across from each other, and for the first time in a long while, she looked older, not physically, but emotionally, as if she already sensed where this conversation would lead. "What is it, dear?" she asked. I held the pendant between my fingers. "Who did this belong to?" The question lingered in the air like frost. Her eyes softened, then clouded, the look of someone standing in front of a truth they've avoided too long. "That's a name we don't speak often," she said gently. "I know," I whispered, "but I need to hear it." She took a deep breath, bracing herself. "It belonged to someone very dear to our family, someone who left before you were born, someone whose story never found its ending." A familiar shiver ran along my spine, the feeling of something aligning, like two puzzle pieces clicking into place. "And the name?" I asked. She hesitated, not because she didn't know, but because saying it out loud meant opening a door she had kept closed for decades. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost reverent. She said the name. The same name he whispered in the cafe, the same name that appeared in the message he swore he didn't send, the same name that lived in his childhood dream. My breath caught. My aunt stood slowly, walked to a small wooden cabinet, and opened a drawer that creaked like it hadn't been touched in years. She pulled out an old envelope, yellowed at the edges, sealed but fragile. She handed it to me. This was meant for the future, for the right moment, but I never knew when that would be. And then you asked me about the pendant, and now I think the moment might be here. My fingers trembled as I held the envelope. On the front, written in delicate handwriting, was the name that had followed me all week, the name he somehow knew. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Because some stories," she said softly, "carry more than memory. They carry meaning, and meaning can arrive too early, or exactly when it's supposed to." I stared at the envelope, feeling the weight of years inside it. "I met someone," I whispered. My aunt's eyes widened. She knew instantly this was bigger than a date gone wrong, bigger than coincidence, bigger than timing. "What happened?" she asked. "He knew the name," I said. "He said it before I ever did. He explained a dream he's had since childhood, and he has a pendant just like mine." Her breath stilled, and for a moment she didn't move. A subtle fear or recognition flickered across her face. "Oh," she murmured, her voice unsteady. "I hoped this day wouldn't come this way, but perhaps it was always meant to." "What do you mean?" I asked. She sat down slowly, her hands clasped together as if preparing for something heavy. "There are things about our family's past you were never told," she began. "And if what you're saying is true, then you're not the only one connected to that name." The room felt smaller suddenly, the air denser, as if the truth was pressing in around us. "What am I connected to?" I whispered. She paused, a long, trembling pause, then spoke the words that opened the door wider than ever before. "You're connected to a promise that was never fulfilled." And before I could respond, her eyes glistened with something that was not quite sorrow, not quite relief, but something between. "Come," she said, "you need to see something," and I knew whatever I was about to learn would change everything. My aunt led me down the narrow hallway toward a small door at the end, a door I rarely noticed, one that blended into the wall like it wasn't meant to be opened. She paused before touching the handle, as if gathering courage from the quiet air around us. "I kept these things hidden," she whispered, "because I thought it was safer to let certain memories rest, but now I see that resting isn't the same as healing." Her words settled over me like snowfall, soft, cold, impossible to ignore. When she pushed the door open, a soft glow from a single window filled the room. Inside were boxes, old suitcases, winter coats sealed in garment bags, and one wooden chest in the corner. She knelt beside it, her hands shaking slightly as she lifted the lid. Inside lay letters tied with ribbon, faded photos, and a small lantern, the same kind we lit every Christmas Eve. My breath tightened. "Why is the lantern here?" I asked. "Because it belonged to the person whose name you heard," she said softly, "because lighting it every year was our way of honoring their memory, even when we chose not to speak of them." She handed me a thin envelope from the top of the chest. The same delicate handwriting crossed its surface, looping softly like a winter breeze.
"This was written before you were born," she said, "by someone who cared deeply for this family, someone who made a promise they couldn't keep." I swallowed hard. "What promise?" My aunt exhaled slowly, then sat beside me on the floor. "Before this person left," she said, "they promised to protect our family in whatever way they could. They believed that some connections don't end, not with time, not with distance, not even with loss." The weight of her words pulled at something inside me, a memory or maybe just the outline of one. "And the name?" I asked quietly. "That name," she whispered, "belongs to the one who made that promise." The room felt still, almost sacred. "Why didn't anyone tell me this?" I asked. "Because when you were young," she said gently, "you carried a sensitivity to things you didn't understand. We worried the story would confuse you or make you feel responsible for something that wasn't yours to carry." I held the envelope, feeling its fragile edges. "But now," she continued, "you've met someone who shouldn't know that name, and yet he does. Someone who carries a pendant that matches yours. Someone who dreams of a lantern he has never seen in real life." Her eyes met mine, soft, trembling with recognition. That kind of connection doesn't happen without meaning. I felt the truth in her voice. Not logical truth, but emotional truth, the kind you can't explain with facts, but can't deny either. "Aunt," I whispered, "who was he?" She reached into the chest again, pulling out a photograph. She placed it gently in my hands. The picture showed a winter landscape, snow, a small lantern, and a figure standing beside it. Not fully clear, but peaceful, warm, familiar in a way that made my heart shift. "That was him," she said softly, "the one who made the promise, the one whose name you heard." I studied the photograph. The figure had a kindness in their posture, something steady, dependable, almost protective. "I don't understand how he's connected to the man I met," I said.
My aunt's voice lowered. "There are connections," she said, "that don't follow the rules of time. Sometimes a promise made in one life is fulfilled in another way, through another person, through another encounter." A quiet shiver moved through me, not fear, but recognition. "What if," she continued, "the person you met carries something of that unfinished promise? What if that's why he dreams of a winter landscape, why he knew the name, why he felt like he'd met you before?" My breath trembled. "What if he's here," she whispered, "to finish what the first one could not?" The thought wrapped itself around me like a winter wind, gentle yet powerful, impossible yet strangely right. I looked down at the envelope in my lap. "Can I open it?" I asked. She nodded. "It was meant for you." My fingers slipped beneath the seal. The paper opened with a soft crack, releasing air that had been trapped for years, air that smelled faintly of pine and something like hope. Inside was a letter. Handwritten, delicate, full of words I wasn't ready to read but needed to. As I unfolded it, my aunt placed a hand on mine. "Whatever you find in that letter," she said, "remember this. Some stories come back into our lives not to haunt us, but to guide us." I nodded. But before I could read a single line, before I could even steady my breath, my phone buzzed. A message. From him. My pulse quickened. I tapped the screen. It was another name. Another impossible connection. And that was when I realized the past wasn't just returning. It was calling.
The message on my phone didn't make sense at first. It wasn't the same name as before. It was another one, softer, shorter, familiar in a way that sent a quiet thrum through my ribs. A name I had seen only once in my life, scribbled in the corner of an old family journal my aunt kept hidden. I stared at the screen, pulse rising. It felt like the universe was pushing pieces toward me faster than I could gather them. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a simple question from him. "Can we talk?" Not dramatic, not insistent, just steady, like he was standing at the edge of the same mystery I was falling into, and he didn't want to face it alone. I hesitated for only a moment before replying, "Yes." Within the hour, we met at a quiet park lined with Christmas lights. Snow covered the paths like a new beginning, untouched and shining under the soft glow of lanterns hung from the trees. He stood there waiting for me, hands in his coat pockets, breath forming small clouds in the cold air. When he saw me approach, something eased in his expression, as if the sight of me grounded him. He said, "I'm glad you came." "I had to," I replied. "Something is happening and we need to understand it together."
He nodded, the relief in his shoulders unmistakable. We walked slowly beneath the lights, our footsteps crunching softly through the snow. For a moment, neither of us spoke, not because we didn't have questions, but because the silence felt more honest than words. Finally, he broke it. "That message I sent you, I didn't type it. I don't even remember holding my phone." "I believe you," I said. He stopped walking. "You do? I've learned in the last 24 hours that there are things happening we can't explain with logic alone." A quiet breath escaped him, half gratitude, half fear. We sat on a bench dusted with snow. The lights above us flickered gently, turning the falling snowflakes into tiny glimmers. "I need to tell you something," he said. "When I woke up this morning, I remembered more of the dream, more than ever before." My heart tightened. "What did you remember?"
He looked out at the empty path, as if seeing something beyond the present moment. "There's always someone walking away," he said. "Not running, not disappearing, just leaving. And I keep trying to follow, but I'd never reach them." I swallowed. "And the names? They started appearing only recently," he said. "One at a time, each time after I dreamed of that winter place." He looked at me. "And when I met you, everything grew sharper. The air between us shifted, the kind of shift you feel in the chest rather than see with the eyes. I think you're connected to these dreams," he said quietly. "And I know how strange that sounds, but it feels like the truth." I didn't pull away, because I felt it too, the strange, unexplainable pull that had been growing stronger with each moment. "I opened a letter today," I told him, "from the person who first carried that name." His brows lifted gently. "What did it say?" I looked down at my hands. It spoke of a promise, of protecting our family, and of something unfinished, something waiting for the right moment to return. He drew in a slow breath. "I think," he said softly, "that moment might be now."
A whisper of wind passed between us, scattering snowflakes across the bench like tiny glowing fragments. "I don't understand how this connects to you," I said. "How you dreamed all of this long before meeting me." He didn't hesitate. "I don't understand it either," he said, "but I feel like I've been carrying pieces of a story that never belonged to me, waiting for someone who could show me where they fit." The honesty in his voice settled into me like warmth spreading through cold hands. "And when you said your full name last night, something in me clicked, like remembering a melody without knowing the song. My throat tightened, not from fear, but recognition. He wasn't searching for drama. He wasn't performing. He was remembering something he didn't live, something that lived in him. What if, I whispered, these dreams, these names, the pendant, what if they're traces of something real, something passed down, carried forward, repeating until someone finally understands it? He turned to me slowly. "Then we understand it together." The snow quieted, the lights steadied, the moment held, and for the first time the fear loosened, replaced by a strange, fragile hope. We sat there for a long time, not as strangers on a blind date gone wrong, but as two people standing at the intersection of a story that had been waiting for them. And as we rose to leave, our steps falling in sync on the snow-covered path, I felt something shift again. The connection wasn't just emotional anymore. It was inevitable.
The next evening we met again, not because we planned it, but because it felt impossible not to. Something was pulling us toward the truth, and neither of us wanted to resist anymore. He suggested we return to the cafe. I didn't hesitate. When we arrived, the place was quieter than before, softened by warm lights and the gentle hush of falling snow outside. It felt like the universe had deliberately dimmed the world so only the truth between us would remain visible. We chose a small table near the window, the same one where everything had begun, but tonight the air felt different, like we'd stepped into a memory we hadn't lived yet. He sat across from me, his eyes holding a weight I hadn't seen before. "I remembered something else," he said quietly. "In the dream." My breath stilled. "What did you remember?" He took a slow breath as though steadying himself against the truth rising within him. "There's a voice," he said. "It calls a name, sometimes gently, sometimes urgently, and recently the voice has been clearer." I leaned forward, my heart tightening with recognition. "Whose voice?" He shook his head softly. "I don't know, but it feels old, not in age, but in memory, like someone who cared deeply, someone who left something unfinished." That word again, unfinished. He continued, his voice low and steady. "And every time I try to reach the person walking away in the dream, the snow grows heavier, the lantern flickers, and the name echoes again, as if begging to be understood."
My fingers tightened around the edge of the table. "I read the letter," I whispered. His eyes sharpened with anticipation. "What did it say?" I swallowed, the words rolling gently but heavily off my tongue. It spoke about a promise to protect our family, a promise that couldn't be fulfilled because life stepped in too soon. It talked about regret and hope and believing that meaning sometimes returns in unexpected ways. For a moment, neither of us breathed. Then he spoke softly. "Can I tell you something without you thinking I won't," I said before he could finish. He exhaled, not in relief, but in surrender to the truth forming around us. "When I was younger," he began, "I always had this feeling that I was supposed to help someone. Not in a heroic way, just be there, support them, protect them somehow. I never knew who, and I never understood why that feeling was so strong." My throat tightened. "And now?" I asked. He looked straight into my eyes, a gaze filled with clarity and something almost like recognition. "Now," he said softly, "I feel like I've found the person that feeling belonged to."
The quiet in the cafe deepened, becoming something intimate and almost sacred. "I know it sounds unbelievable," he added quickly, "but when I said your name that night, it didn't feel random. It felt like remembering a promise I never made, but someone did." A shiver ran through me, not from cold, but from understanding. "What if," he continued, "I carry a piece of the memory your family tried to protect? What if some part of that promise found its way into me?" The idea should have sounded impossible, but sitting there, watching the sincerity in his eyes, I felt only one thing: truth. Not logical truth, emotional truth, the kind you recognize before you understand. He hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket. "Here," he said, placing his pendant on the table beside mine, 2 silver winter leaves, identical, reflecting the soft glow of holiday lights. "When you showed me yours," he whispered, "everything inside me felt like it fell into place." I touched both pendants gently. They looked like they belonged together, 2 halves of a story, reunited after being carried separately for years. "My aunt said the original pendant was a symbol," I told him softly. "A reminder of that promise and of the person who made it." He leaned closer, voice barely audible. "And what if that symbol found its way to both of us?" I inhaled sharply, a quiet realization forming like a spark inside my chest. "What if," he said, "the one who made the promise found a way to keep it through me?" The idea washed through me, strange, warm, overwhelming, a connection that didn't follow time, logic, or explanation, but didn't need to. "I don't know what all of this means yet," I whispered, "but I know it doesn't feel like coincidence." He reached out, not to touch me, but to place his hand near mine, close enough that the warmth from his fingertips brushed the air between us. "Neither do I," he said, "but I feel like this, us meeting now, was meant to happen." Outside, the snow fell heavier, wrapping the world in white. Inside, the lights above us glowed softly, as if illuminating the truth forming between 2 people who were strangers only days ago. And without speaking it aloud, we both understood. This wasn't a blind date gone wrong. This wasn't chance. This wasn't coincidence. This was a promise returning home. Christmas Eve arrived quietly, as if the world wanted to soften itself for whatever truth was waiting to be revealed. I woke with a strange calmness, not certainty, but readiness. For the first time, the weight of the past didn't feel like something to fear. It felt like something to finally meet. He texted me early. "Can we see each other today? I think there's something we still need to understand." There was no hesitation this time. I knew exactly where we needed to go. We met near the edge of town, where a small hill overlooked the houses below. Snow blanketed everything. Rooftops, trees, quiet roads, turning the world into a soft white canvas. I carried the old family lantern. He carried both pendants in his coat pocket. When we reached the hilltop, the town lights flickered like distant stars. The air was crisp, the kind that fills your lungs with cold and clarity at the same time. He stood beside me, hands in his pockets, breath warming the air. "I remembered something else last night," he said quietly. "Something important." I looked at him. "What did you remember?" He said that the dream wasn't just someone leaving. It was someone leaving for a reason. Someone who felt they had to go, but never stopped caring. My chest tightened. "And the name?" I asked. "It wasn't calling to the person walking away," he said softly. "It was calling to the one left behind." The wind brushed gently past us, carrying a strange warmth despite the cold.
I think, he continued, whoever made that promise wanted it to reach you, somehow, through something bigger than memory. I lifted the lantern, its glass slightly fogged with age. This was theirs, I whispered. Their symbol, their light. He nodded slowly. And maybe I've been carrying their hope without knowing it. We stood there for a moment, surrounded by snow and quiet, and a sense of something much older than either of us. Can I show you something? He asked then. He reached for my hand, not in romance, not an impulse, but in a way that felt gentle, steady, meant. When our hands touched, a warmth spread through me, familiar, comforting, like a memory I had never lived, but somehow recognized. He placed both pendants in my palm. Side by side, they formed a perfect pair, two winter leaves, identical in shape, connected in meaning. When I found mine, he said, I didn't know why I kept it. I just felt like it mattered. It did, I whispered, and maybe it always belonged with the other one. He exhaled, not from cold, but from relief, as if they were meant to be brought together again.
I lit the lantern. A soft glow bloomed inside it, warm and steady, illuminating our faces in golden light. My aunt said this lantern was a reminder, a way to keep the promise alive, even when we didn't speak the name. He watched the flame with reverence. What if, he said, the promise survived through time, waiting for the moment it could finally be fulfilled? The question settled into the air between us, gentle, powerful, true. I felt tears gather behind my eyes, not from sadness, but from understanding. Maybe you're here, I whispered, to finish what he started, not by being him, but by carrying the part of him that never found peace. His eyes softened. And maybe you're here, he said, to receive what he never got to give. A warmth settled over us then, from the lantern, from the snow, from the quiet truth we were finally ready to accept. This connection wasn't an accident. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't luck. It was a promise continuing its journey. He stepped closer, not rushing, not assuming, just closing the space gently, respectfully. Whatever this is, he said softly, I'm not afraid of it anymore. Neither am I. The lantern glowed brighter for a moment, as if acknowledging the truth spoken out loud. He smiled, a small, honest smile that held more meaning than words. Can we start from here? He asked. Yes, I whispered. I think this is where the promise finally becomes something new. We stood there on the snowy hill, two strangers who were never truly strangers, holding the lantern's warm light between us, a reminder that some connections don't arrive to confuse us, they arrive to complete us. And as the Christmas bells rang faintly in the distance, I felt the story settle into its final shape. Our blind date wasn't a mistake. It was an echo, a continuation, a return, a promise finding its way home.
If this story touched you, if it moved something in your heart, consider subscribing to the channel.